Haunted Mansion is one of Disney's most iconic amusement park attractions, being first opened in 1969, and can be located in not only Disneyland, but also Magic Kingdom and Disney Tokyo. The ride takes you on a tour through the mansion as you encounter its ghostly inhabitants. Since then, there have been 2 movies based on the attraction. 2003's The Haunted Mansion, starring Eddie Murphy, who plays as a realtor agent who cares more about his business than his family, and once they get locked inside the building, he must save his wife and kids from certain doom, and himself from being cucked by a ghost. Then there's 2023's Haunted Mansion, but let's not talk about that, because it's this gross thing called modern. Ugh, disgusting! Come back where you're at least considered nostalgic by the internet standards. Okay, you can come back now. The mansion is turned into a bed and breakfast until they become victim of paranormal activity. An astrophysicist invents a camera that can detect dark matter and is invited to the mansion by an exorcist hoping to cleanse the house of its spirits. And then hilarity ensues, I guess. I don't know, I didn't see it. And that's because we're not talking about the movies, but instead the video game released in 2003 on the PlayStation 2, GameCube, and Xbox.
I'm sorry if you find this confusing, Zeke, but I'm afraid we have little time and much to do.
Despite releasing the same year as the Eddie Murphy film, the game has nothing to do with that movie and instead has its own story, but it has a ticket pass inside the box. Wow, this is worthless to me now. You play as an aspiring author named Zeke, who gets invited into the mansion with an offer of becoming its caretaker. He takes the job hoping to make enough money to follow his dream, but it turns out the job is much more than he bargained for, as now he must venture with Leota, the spirit in the crystal ball, and that's in almost every interpretation of the ride, as they fight off evil spirits, collect death certificates of the home's inhabitants, in return for what I can only describe as the Chaos Emeralds, and save the 999 souls trapped in the mansion by Atticus Thorne, who intends to use them to take over the afterlife. It's like if the existence of the afterlife was proven, and Reddit atheists wanted to destroy it so they could become even more insufferable on the internet. You must turn on the lights in each room to be able to find and capture the trapped souls. But to get to each light switch, you must complete a certain challenge while defending yourself against the evil spirits inside the home. The combat is pretty basic. You have a projectile that shoots from your lantern, a lock-on function, and the ability to strafe to avoid enemy attacks. While the combat itself is pretty basic, you're expected to change your approach for different enemy types, and as you deliver death certificates and gain these jewels, you also gain new shots you can access by charging your attack and upgrades to each shot type. That reminds me, I made a dumb while playing this for the first time. Due to the charging system, you can't just hold the button down to fire. You have to press it rapidly or else no other shots come out. I sure felt like an idiot almost dying in the first room because of this. Listen, I may have a brain, but that doesn't mean I know how to use it. Also, I'm pretty sure there's holes in it or something. I didn't have enough credits to graduate. There's a decent amount of depth in the combat despite only having one attack. While every enemy can be beaten by the default shot, it's better to face each one with a different approach. See, this is how you spice up a simple gameplay style. Challenge the player to get them to experiment with the tools they have. In too many games, they try to spice things up by completely changing the gameplay into a less refined version of a different genre, like shooters, rhythm games, and stealth segments. But then you look at a game like Smash Brothers. Sure, most of the time you're fighting other characters, but then you have stuff like Target Smash, Home Run Contests, Subspace Emissary, and boss battles. Modes that change the game up not by altering the gameplay to such an extreme, but by simply challenging the expected approach. This game does that with just its enemies and puzzles. The different types of enemies are a mixed bag when it comes to their designs. Some are the expected Halloween or horror tropes like giant spiders, ghosts, and skeletons. Boop! But sometimes there comes an enemy that makes you forget that Disney's name is on this. Like these screaming banshees that use the exact same stock scream as these flying enemies in American McGee's Alice. Such a strange connection. Or this Grim Reaper enemy, whose introduction is a stressful chase sequence, where he's slowly gaining up to you, and when he does become a normal enemy, he becomes one of the deadliest. This is probably the closest thing to an official Disney horror game out there. Strange considering this is also the same generation Nintendo made their first horror game, Eternal Darkness. And they'll probably never do something like this again in the near future. That's why we all know the round things on the Mickey Mouse symbol are his ears, because they have no balls. Also, I'm pretty sure no one has ever made that mistake before, and if you have, there's something dreadfully wrong with you. You are beyond God's help. I still don't mind the use of standard Halloween tropes, as they're tropes for a reason. They're pretty welcome in my book. They're just a little more expected is all. The main star of the game in my opinion is the puzzles. Each room has a different challenge to get to the light switch. Some are standard ideas like turning mirrors to reflect light to a certain point, a battle royale, or walking on a ball and attempting to use physics to get from one point to another. But for every standard idea of a puzzle, there's also a unique concept waiting around the corner. For example, there's one where you're shrunk down and put on a pool table in a dark void. The goal is to get all the balls into the holes, but you can't move them directly. Instead, the white cue ball will aim towards you, so you must use yourself as an aiming reticle to guide the ball to clear the table. There's also this room which seems small, but as soon as you take your first steps, the walls start moving with you, revealing a much larger location. These are really cool ideas that I hope more people take inspiration from. This game is worth looking into just for the concepts and potential inspiration. It may be a mixed bag of standard and original ideas, but even the safe ideas aren't bad either. It all depends on their execution, and yeah, sometimes it doesn't hit the nail. Remember the ballroom I mentioned earlier? They expect you to gain speed to go up these ramps, but you could just spam jump instead. But there's still a lot of variety here, no puzzles reused, and each room really is different. And if you ever get stuck, you can get Leota to give you a hint.
Before each painting, pass you should, and change them all from bad to good.
Very rarely did I need help from a walkthrough to get by. Sometimes it makes me feel like a high school graduate. Fuck you, I got my GED. That means I'm a greatly educated dummy. But there are a few problems keeping this good game from being a great game. For one, the jumping is kinda awkward. As soon as you hit the button, you shoot up into the air and fall like a ton of bricks right afterwards. This wouldn't be so bad, but there are some platforming challenges here. No, you can't grab onto ledges, you have to be precise with your jumps. Next is the camera, which is a running theme for many games that came during the 2000s. It's understandable as we were still new to the third dimension, but this game has a unique problem. You'll turn the camera and it stays turned, but as soon as you start moving in a different direction, the camera slowly starts to pan in the direction you're moving. You can lock on to enemies, but it only sometimes seems to lock on to what you want to. I don't know much about game development, but it seems like the lock-on system is one of those things that seems simple to develop, but is actually really complicated to program, much like going up a ladder. Sometimes it works, but other times, despite an enemy being close by, it'll instead focus on a completely different enemy farther away. It seems that the lock-on system is based on direction rather than proximity. To properly explain what I mean, think of your character's point of view as a straightforward line coming from your center. The enemy that's closer to the center of this line is what the lock-on prioritizes. That's my only theory as to what could be happening here. Like I said, I'm only just getting into game development, so I could be completely wrong. Another problem are these ghosts, the first enemies you come across. If they're in your general line of sight, then they won't be too hard to deal with. But if they're coming from behind, that's a different story. They're just as fast as you are, so there's no point in running away. You can't turn and shoot without locking on, and in this situation the lock-on rarely works. And guess who's getting a free hit? That would be you. And I don't know what to tell you, man. You're just gonna have to deal with it. Look, I had to deal with a goal looking at my gross insides and squishy bits. You don't see me complaining minus the last paragraph on this script. But hey, let's not change the subject. We're talking about you here, and you should give this game a shot if you find it somewhere. It's pretty good for what it is. It's not perfect, and I would say this is one of those cases where you're going to need to be in the right mindset to approach it. It's the type of game that I can see some beating multiple times, while others might not even complete their first playthrough. This is a very case-by-case scenario type of game. But hey, unlike what the internet tries to tell you on a daily basis, these things are subjective. But in my superior opinion, I would say that the Haunted Mansion is pretty good. Not great, but still enjoyable, and who knows, I might revisit it one day.